Shalom, family. Welcome to part 4 of how to begin researching if the Negro is the true Hebrew Israelite of the Bible. If this does not convince you, nothing will. Just to note, this is probably the last in the how to begin researching if the Negro is the true Hebrew Israelite of the Bible. A lot of these teachings are really like little nuggets for you to go research and dig deeper about who you are. If you're a Christian who's a Negro, then you're a Hebrew Israelite. If you're a Negro and you're not a Christian, you're a Hebrew Israelite by blood. Right now, don't let anyone tell you that it doesn't matter that you are Israel by blood, because according to the scriptures, it does matter. Spiritually, it doesn't matter. Grafted into the vine, both Jew and Gentile become one in the vine, but in reality, it does matter because there's a lot of prophecies concerning you in the last days. And we need to know these things because the devil is sneaky. The devil is very deceitful and very good at what he does. And the amount of effort put to hide who you are throughout all these centuries, these generations, is just amazing. And some of the things that we're going to cover, I'm thinking about going in detail in the future, maybe doing a DVD or writing a book about the Black Hebrew Israelites, right? And that's not just us in America, but those in Africa, and what our history was and what happened in Europe. And in this teaching here, you're going, really these nuggets, not really a teaching, but these little nuggets, you're going to see some things that they never taught you in school, or that the fake Jews appropriated for their history. So a lot of things that occurred in Europe really was for our people, right? It was the Negro, it was the Black Hebrew Israelites, right? The true Jews of the Bible, if you will, or the true Judeans, right? Or the true descendants of Judah. This little piece, this little nugget is from Sir Harry H. Johnson's The Negro in the New World. And remember, these are just little nuggets. So if we read below in the footnotes, we find something very interesting. It says the Jews are composed of 3 or 4 separate racial elements. So who are we talking about? We're talking about the Jews, right? And the Asiatic Negroid strain, okay, that's one element or version of the Jew. The Asiatic Negroid strain shows itself occasionally in the curly hair, the long eye, and the proportions of the skull. The Jewish hybrids with the Negro in Jamaica and Guyana reproduce most strikingly the Assyrian type. It is quite conceivable that the great peninsula of Arabia was once populated as far as its natural conditions allowed by a primitive Negro stock, which may have been later or partially exterminated by changing and unfavorable conditions of climate and at the coming of the white man in his type. So really, let's just boil this down to these Negroes of this type probably sort of disappeared because of the white man. I mean, that just the sum of the matter, right? When they came to Africa, when they came to the Indian territories, right? So what we want to take from here is that the Jews are composed of 3 or 4 separate racial elements. And one of those elements is the Asiatic Negroid strain. So we need to understand that they know who you are. They've always known who you are. But yet they call you beasts of the field. They call you all kinds of names. And those are things that we might get into in a future book that I want to write, or maybe a DVD that I put together. And I'm not saying I'm going to do it. I don't know yet. Dealing with our history, in relation to Europe and Africa. And some of those things you're going to see here. Black like Ethiopian matches Titus description. On the classification and geographical distribution of the mammalia, Richard Owen, FRS. So on the left-hand side, we read, as to stature, the Bushmen of South Africa and the natives of Lapland exhibit the extreme of diminution, that's reduction, ranging from 4 to 5 feet. Some of the Germanic races and the Patagonian Indians exhibit the opposite extreme, ranging from 6 to 7 feet. The medium size prevails generally throughout the races of mankind, with references to the characteristics of color which are extreme. We have now opportunities of knowing how much that character is the result of the influence of climate. We know it more particularly by that most valuable mode of testing, such influences which we derive from the peculiarity of the Jewish race. For 1800 years that race has been dispersed in different latitudes and climates, and they have preserved themselves distinct from intermixture with other races of mankind. There are some Jews still lingering in the valleys of the Jordan, having been oppressed by the successive conquerors of Syria for ages. A low race of people, and described by trustworthy travelers as being as black as any of the Ethiopian races. Others of the Jewish people participating as European civilization and dwelling in northern nations show instances of the light complexion, the blue eyes, the light hair of the Scandinavian families. The condition of the Hebrews since their dispersion has not been such as to admit of much admixture by the proselytism of the household slaves. We are thus led to account for the differences in color by the influence of climate, without having to refer them to original or specific distinction. So let's take note here, right? What he's saying here is that basically the Negroes are black because of the climate, right? I mean, that was the old theories, right, of these quote unquote scholars, you know, these white scholars who said that black people were black because of the area of the world they live in, and then white people are white because the area of the world that they live in, and that's not true, right? But we want to note here that it says that these people, right, they are black as any of the Ethiopian races. So remember Titus. Titus described the true Hebrew Israelites, the true Jews, as being like the Ethiopians. This is a book by James Gray Jackson. It's called Letters Descriptive of Travels Through West and South Barbary and Across the Mountains of Atlas. Page 187. Yahudi, a place of great trade. This place is reported to be inhabited by one of the lost tribes of Israel, possibly an immigration from the tribe of Judah. Yahudah in African, Arabic, and signifies Judah. Yahudi signifies Jew. It is not impossible that many of the lost tribes of Israel may be found dispersed in the interior regions of Africa. When we shall become better acquainted with that continent, it is certain that some of the nations that possess the country eastward of Palestine, when the Israelites were a favored nation, have immigrated to Africa. An immigration of the Amorites are now in possession of the declivity of the Atlas Mountains westward of the sanctuary of Mule Dris, and in the neighborhood of the ruins of Pharaoh they live in encampment. So here we see that in Africa there's an area within Africa that they refer to as Yahudi. And in Yahudi there are the Yahudah, right, which is Judah. That's why they get Judah from, but it's Yahudah. And see, they know all of these things, right? So they stole your identity, they stole your names, they stole your history, and they called you, you know, dumb and weak and docile. And so some of those things I'm not going to get into here and be honest with you, it's probably good because it will make you angry the way that they thought and schemed against our people. So this alone shows you that the Yahudi or Yahudah is who they're talking about, right? Judah. And so, you know, a lot of people are going to tell you that it doesn't matter because right now, the evidence, as you can see, is overwhelming of who we are, right? It's overwhelming that we are the people of Yah. And so what they're going to do is they're going to tell you, well, it doesn't matter anymore, right? But it's not true. And if you think it doesn't matter, then watch my video called precious stones. Watch that video. You think it doesn't matter who Israel is. It does, which is the reason why Israel has been persecuted for almost their entire existence. This is called the Nautical Magazine, a journal of papers on subjects connected, volume 39. Barbet states that in the reign of Don John II, and about the close of the 15th century, large numbers of Jews were expelled from Portugal and taken to the coast of southern Guinea. Now remember this, okay, because we're going to go in detail a little bit at the end of this, that the island of St. Thomas, which is not more than 100 miles from the mainland, was populated by mulattoes descended from the Jewish exiles and Anglo women. So, well, we're going. It is possible that the Jewish type of character noticed at the Gabon and Luango may have originated from this source, but if so, it is unknown to the present inhabitants of the country, and it would have been somewhat singular if the Roman Catholic missionaries at Luango had not detected this circumstance instead of regarding them as a pure African family of Jews. Kwango and Angola, or Dongo people, there have been so many of the Congos and Angolos brought to this country in former years, while still greater numbers have been imported into Brazil of late, that it scarcely seemed necessary to give a very minute account of them in this place. It is important to remark, however, that these families in Africa cannot be fairly estimated by such specimens of the nation as have been brought to America, for the subjects of the slave trade have almost invariably been gathered either from certain degraded clans that are interspersed among the more powerful tribes. So here we see, and we're going to get into this a little more, there were mulattoes from the relationship between the Jews and the Anglo women, right? So the fact that you have mulattoes, right, shows you that the Jews were black, right? Because we know the Anglo women, right, that they were white. And so mulattoes is a mixture of black and white, right? So what happens here, the Jews, both the mulattoes and the other Jews who were living in Europe, living in Portugal and Spain, they got exiled from Portugal, right? And they got exiled from Spain, and they were sent back to St. Thomé, which is St. Thomas, which is an island right on the outskirts of Africa. And some were sent back to West Africa, and we're going to see that. So what happened was, the fake Jews try to take that history of ours, right? That it was them that were exiled, but no, it wasn't them that were exiled. They exiled our people, the Negro, to Africa, and it makes sense, right? Because what happened was they sent our people there, kicked our people out of Europe, sent them back to West Africa to later be rounded up into slavery. Christian researchers in Asia, Claudius Buchanan, the Black Jews. It is only necessary to look at the countenance of the Black Jews to be satisfied that their ancestors must have arrived in India many ages before the white Jews. Their Hindu complexion and their very imperfect resemblance to the European Jews indicate that they have been detached from the parent stock in Judea many ages before the Jews in the West, and that there have been intermarriages with families not Israelitish. I had heard that those tribes which had passed the Indus have assimilated so much so the customs and habits of the countries in which they live. Okay, so here we see that there are black Jews and white Jews. What they're not saying is that the white Jews are converts, right? And so when we look at history, we find out, we know about in Khazaria, right, the Khazar Jews and how they converted, which are white Europeans who converted to Judaism. We know about that. And so basically what we have here is that the black Jews, right, it says the black Jews to be satisfied that their ancestors must have arrived in India many ages before the whites. So the blacks were there before the whites. Okay, and so what you have, even in history, you will see, and even in the Bible, you have many other nations that will come to Israel, right? You have people who converted to Judaism. You even have Josephus talking about all the other nations that came to Israel, and they converted to okay, for all purposes, Judaism, let's call it that, right? They converted and they were referred to as Jews, right? So even Josephus said, even if you converted, if you was a convert, you were called a Jew, even though you weren't a Yahudi, as we saw, which is the true name, Yahudi, right? And Yahudah, from Judah, Yahudah. So here we see that the black Jews are the original ones. They were there before the white Jews. So what you're going to find out if you go look at In Search of Elusive Esau and in other videos, I go to show that, Rome that's who the fake Jews are. They're Romans, right? They're descendants of Japhet, but they intermingled with Esau, and some people are going to tell you, well, Esau is black because, whatever, right? What happened was, just as all throughout the scriptures, right, we saw that some people got cursed and they were turned white. Okay, that's what happened. Okay, we see it today. We see albinos, right? They turn white. That's where white people come from. So they're albinos. They lack melanin. And I'm not trying to make anyone look bad, but I'm just telling you, based upon what we know now in history, in the true history, what seems to have occurred. So this is a book by John Ogilby, America Being an Accurate Description of the New World, page 574. The Portuguese that dwelt on this island informed the Netherlanders that few lived above 50 years there. Yet notwithstanding the great gain tempted them to tarry, several of them having 200 or 300 Negroes that worked in sugar mills. That John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither about 200 years before, whom thought the wholesome air destroyed, yet the place was not left desolate. For he sent new inhabitants who first settled in Guinea, right? Guinea is a territory within Africa. Next in Angola, we know where Angola is. And lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be the better use of the air. That the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion, and caused their children to be baptized, from whom, coming thither in great numbers, most of the present inhabitants were descended. Twice a year, in March and September, the sun is in the zenith here, being right perpendicular, and by that means makes no shadow at noon, but the heat is somewhat mollified in these 2 months by the rains which fall and in the summer. So we're going to stop there. So here we see what was happening is, like I mentioned before, the Negroes, they were in Portugal, and they were in Portugal and Spain, and they were kicked out of Portugal, they were kicked out of Spain, and they were sent to St. Thomas Island, right? And here we even see that it's the Negroes, right? And what happened was the Roman Catholic Church, a lot of times you read that as Christianity, well, but that's semantics, I guess. But the Roman Catholic Church was responsible for trying to force the true Hebrews, the Yahudi, the true Jews, to convert to Roman Catholicism, and they didn't want to do it. So they took their children from them, right? And they sent them to St. Thomas, and they sent some of the Jews back to West Africa. And we're going to see that as well. Joseph DUPUIS, Journal of a Resident of Ashanti. Joseph DUPUIS goes on to describe these particular Jews as brown rather than the dark black as described by other authors. There's always been lighter colored Africans among all tribes. We see this predominantly in Nigeria. Ashanti people are various colors as well. This is something Gentiles do not understand. So Gentiles, when they see somebody say, okay, well, they say, well, he's not truly black, or, this person wasn't truly black. Well, do they not know that black people have a range of colors? I mean, from very light to brown to dark brown to blacker than black. So let's read this. The Jews of Sudan, right, that's Sudan, according to my informers, divided into many large and small tribes, with whose names they are unacquainted. Their mode of life in some countries is pastoral, but the towns are filled with traders and artificers of that faith, who gain their subsistence at their several employments in the service of the Muslims under whose government they live as vassals. This in reference to Mr. Bodek's kingdom of Yahudi. Remember we talked about the Yahudi, which is Judah, right? The Yahudi, Judah. I may be permitted to say is the only state of society in which that oppressed nation is suffered to live, and the tribes without security in their possessions, without public revenue or arms, are hourly exposed to insult and rapine from the blind zeal and active bigotry by which their lords are animated in those countries. The lands occupied by these people cover a wide extent between Messina and Kaby. They are said to be mingled also with the upper Falula tribes eastward of Timbuktu. In many parts of Meroe, they have inheritance or are employed as artificers in the cities and towns. As we live among the heathen, said Bashar, so do the Jews in Meroah and Philani with our brethren, but they are not esteemed like us, for they are a people hardened in their sins and obstinate in infidelity. The anger of God is upon them, and therefore are they given to the rule of the Muslims, until they shall become incorporated with the faithful. The tribes are not black, but of a color resembling the Arabs of the north. But what is more material, these Sudanic Jews are reported to have been the original inhabitants throughout, before the Arabs were acquainted with Central Africa. So here we see they weren't as dark as, some of the Hebrew Israelites, right? Some of the Hebrew Israelites were as dark as the Faluas. The Falua tribes is the not the Falasha, but it's the Fulani, right? So the Falua is the Fulani tribes. And, when I do that book, if I do the book or if I do the DVD, I haven't decided yet. The Falua, they are the ones that worked with the Europeans to enslave our people. So what happened was, and these are in other books, the Falua, they came and the Europeans gave them weapons. They had guns. And so basically they would surround our villages, and they would take all of our people and march them off and sell them to the Europeans. And so they sold them to the Europeans for more guns, for alcohol and other things, right? So those are some of the traders, that betrayed us. Now, not only are the Falua, but also, the ASHANTEE sold us, and the kings within Dahomey. So basically what you had going on with the situation with Joseph, right, in my opinion, his brethren sold him into slavery. So we had the same thing here. Some of our brethren sold us into slavery. Now the Falua, they're not considered Negro. They were considered non-Negroes, right? So the Falua tribes were probably not Israelites. Narratives of Travels and Discoveries in Northern and Central Africa, 1822 to 1823, by DIXON Denham. Said he, "No," said I. "Christians then?" "Even so," replied I have read of you. You are better than Jews," said he. "Are Jews white like you?" "No," replied I, "rather more like yourself, very dark." "Really?" said the sheik. "Why are they not quite white? They are a bad people." After staying a full hour, he took my hand and said, "I see you are a sultan. I never saw anybody like you. The sight of you is as pleasing to my eyes as your words are to my ears. My heart says you are my friend. May you die at your own tents and in the arms of your wives and family." So here we see that, okay, there was a white sultan, and he says, "Well, what are are the Jews like you?" You're like, "Well, no, they're more dark like you," right? So, let's read that again. He said, "No," said I, "Christian then?" "Even so," replied I have read of you. You are better than Jews," said he. "Are Jews white like you?" So this guy was white, right? And he thought he was asking if the Jews are white like you. He says, "No, rather more like yourself." So this sheikh, he was dark, very dark, right? So the sheikh goes on to say they are bad people. So our people had a bad reputation back then, right? All of those stories about the Jews being bad, our people had a bad reputation. And remember, they turned away from the Most High. They started worshiping other gods. They started worshiping the sun, the moon, and the stars, which is the reason why they went into captivity. But what we want to note here is that this guy, this sheikh, right, while talking to this particular white person, because he said, "Well, are you a Christian?" right? He's talking to this white person. He said, "Well, are they white like you?" He said, "No, they're very dark like you." So that shows you that the Jews, everyone knew that the Jews were black. Travels in interior districts of Africa, performed in the years 1795, 1796. Last Journey in Life by MUNGO Park. The Moors who are engaged in commerce, we are assured on the authority of Mr. Park that the Negroes are in possession of the Pentateuch in the Arabic tongue, which they very much esteem a good slave being considered as the just price of a single copy. It is also said that a version of the Psalms, Zabora, Dawidi, and one of the prophecies of Isaiah, single Isaiah, are to be met within the country. It is probable in all these copies there are interpolations of some of the peculiar tenets of Muhammad, right? Mahomet, that's the Muslims. From these manuscripts, the Negroes are well acquainted with the account of our first parents, the death of Abel, and the deluge. So here, Mungo Park says what? He says, in the hands, right, of the Negroes was the Pentateuch, right? And it was written in the Arabic tongue. And you got to understand that, you know, Paleo Hebrew is pretty much almost Arabic, right? It's very similar to the Arabic language. Same thing with the Bantu. They all have similarities. And so we even see here some of the true names like Dawidi, right? Which some people pronounce it Dawood, which is referring to David. And so here, once again, we see that the Negroes also had the Pentateuch, which is, you know, the first 5 books of the Bible, right? The laws, right? Atlas Geographus, or a complete system of geography, Africa, Volume 1. Lee says the ancient Africans had stately temples where they worshipped the sun and fire and always kept the ladder burning. Those of Libya and Numidia sacrificed to a certain planet, but those of Negro land worshipped the Lord of heaven. The Arabian historians say the Africans used only Roman letters. All right, so here we see what? We see that there were a separate group of people in Africa, right? And they were considered Africans, but yet they worshipped the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets, right? But we also see here that those in Negro land, right, the Negroes, which is where they took us from when they came to take our ancestors from the slave coast, right, they worshiped the Lord of heaven. So we see even here that our people, a lot of them, were worshiping the Lord of heaven. Some of them were worshiping other gods and the sun, moon, and stars and everything else. So now, whether these Africans they're referred to are non-Hebrews or, you know, or are they Hebrews? I don't know, right? I mean, because sometimes, you know, it could be another tribe that was, you know, worshiping other gods, right? Which is why a lot of our people went into slavery, which is why Judah went into slavery. So, but here we see in Negro land, they worship the Lord of heaven. So outside of Negro land, they were worshiping something else. So now where at, it doesn't say. Like, you know, was it in the Sahara? Was it further up near Morocco? Because, you know, a lot of our people were in Northern Africa as well. Now here's a book by Malin Nuit. It's called The Portuguese in West Africa, 1415 to 1670, a documentary history. Sephardic Jews were black Africans. So this right here is an introduction to the book, right? And as we go on, you're going to be able to tie this back to some of the things we just talked about what occurred in Portugal, right? And so here, this is like a summary of what the book is about. The Portuguese in West Africa, 1415 to 1670, brings together a collection of documents, the majority in New English translation, that illustrate aspects of the encounters between the Portuguese and the people of North and West Africa. This period witnessed the diaspora of the Sephardic Jews, the immigration of Portuguese to West Africa and the islands, and the beginnings of the black diaspora associated with the slave trade. The documents show how the Portuguese tried to understand the societies with which they came into contact and to reconcile their experience with the myths, legends inherited from classical and medieval learning. They also show how Africans reacted to the coming of Europeans, adapting Christian ideas to local beliefs and making use of exotic imports and European technologies. The documents also describe the evolution of the black Portuguese communities in Guinea and the islands, as well as the slave trade, and why that it was organized, understood, and justified. So, to sum this up, right, we see here that there was a period of a diaspora of the Sephardic Jews which immigrated, right, of the Portuguese to West Africa. So if you remember the previous screens that I showed you, that some of the people were exiled, right, from Portugal to West Africa or to Saint Tomé, right? And so these people, they were exiled, and some of them were mulattoes, as we saw in other screens. that some of them were mulattoes, which was a mixture of the Portuguese and the Negroes who had relations back then. So some of the mulattoes they sent back to West Africa as well. Now, the reason they sent them back to West Africa, you know, as you saw earlier, they would not convert to Roman Catholicism, right? So if they didn't convert, they took their children, and they tried to convert their children, and the rest they sent back to West Africa. So we'll go on and you know, be honest with you. I mean, that's why I say that there's going to need to be just a total study on this history, and that way we could cover everything, and it's going to be huge, right? So you know, if you all think I should do that, let me know. If you think I should do a book or a DVD or something like that on our history as Black Hebrew Israelites, you know, and our relationships to Europe, let me know. And you know, I may even want to do a GoFundMe thing. So, you know, if you want to do that, let me know if you want me to do that. I don't know. I mean, right now I have to pray about it, right? So Black Jews kicked out of Europe. Meanwhile, new communities, and this continuation of that book, meanwhile, new communities with a distinct Creole identity were emerging in the islands. Migrants from Portugal were ready enough to settle Madeira, which was relatively close to Portugal. However, fewer people went to the Azores, and fewer still to Cape Verde and distant Guinea. Some of the captains tried to recruit settlers from the Netherlands and Italy, and it seems that one of the captains of St. Thomé, that's St. Thomas, in the Gulf of Guinea, arranged for Jewish children taken from parents who refused to convert. Remember, we talked about that? They didn't want to convert to Roman Catholicism, to be consigned as colonists to the tropics. However, it was the importation of slaves from Africa that eventually secured the demographic success of the island colonies. Although considerable numbers of slaves were brought to Madeira to work the sugar plantations, the Portuguese element in the population always predominated. In Cape Verde and St. Thomé, or St. Thomas, however, imported slaves soon became the most important element in the population. Portuguese settlers took African wives, and the descendants formed a free black population, which retained strong cultural links with mainland Africa, and correspondingly fueled this direct ties with Portugal. So they sent a lot of the children, right? I mean, they sent the parents who refused to convert. They sent them to West Africa, right, to St. Thomé, and they took their children and they tried to convert their children. And there's some other books out there where they talk about how they gave the kids to other Portuguese families to live with, to adopt, right? Some of the Portuguese adopted those kids, and they you know, converted some of them to Roman Catholicism, you know. So a lot of times, you know, they would just say Christianity, right? Now, I'm of the opinion that we should always use a distinction between the term Christianity, because you all like to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm of the opinion that, you know, there's a difference between Roman Catholicism and a difference between European Christianity, right? Which is what we have here in America and what many of the churches teach today, right? So I do agree with you that there's some corruption there, some lies concerning what the scriptures truly teach. Now, in terms of you know, the gospel is correct, right? The Bible, the message is correct, but is their interpretation of that, right? Is their commentary on those scriptures. So let's continue. So as we saw, they went to Guinea. Guinea is in Africa. Guinea is a country in West Africa, bordered on the west by the Atlantic Ocean. It's known for the Mount Nimba strict nature reserve in the southeast. The reserve projects a forested mountain range rich in native plants and animals. Okay, so on. So this is the territory that they went to, right? And right on the left, in the water, right there between Sierra Leone and Calgary, is an island called St. Thomé, which is called St. Thomas. And they sent a lot of them to St. Thomas, but they also sent some to West Africa. So we saw all of that, you know, and we saw that they were called Sephardic Jews, right? And that they were sent from Portugal to West Africa. So we had that. So the white fake Jews are going to say, well, some of our people just ended up going to Africa, right? Okay, yeah, right, okay. But this proves that, because remember, this is the same book. This proves that the Jews that we're talking about were black Jews, right? They were black people. And we saw that they were mulatto. Mulatto are the ones that intermix with the Europeans, right? The Anglo women. We saw that, right? So proof that they were black African Jews. In this country and in Mandinga, there are Jews who are called Gaul, and they are black like the people of the country. However, they do not have synagogues and do not practice the ceremonies of other Jews. Okay, so right there, the Mandinga, right? Everybody know about the Mandinga tribe. You can pronounce it as Mandinga or Mandinga. And this is the Mandinga people, right? And they right here say they're Jews, and they right here say that they're black. These Gauls are usually jesters and singers and play on viols and cavacos. And because they do not dare to enter the villages, they take up a position behind the houses of the lords of the village. And at daybreak, they sing his praises until he ordered them to be given a ration of millet, and then they go away. When the Lord leaves his house, these Jews go in front of him, singing and calling out their jests. If the Jews did not know these jests, and if they did not greet the Lord in this way, they would not be tolerated by the blacks. For so great is the ill will felt towards them that they are barred by the blacks and do not dare enter one of their houses except that of the Lord. And if they are found in the village, they are beaten with sticks. No Gaul, whether a Jew or a Jewess, may take water from a spring until everyone else has finished drawing water. And then that last person will give them water. So here, what do we see? We saw in the other section at the top that the Mandinga are Jews, and that the Jews were called Gauls, right? And that the Gauls, who are the Jews, who are the Mandinga, are black people, right? We agree with that, right? And so right here we see that the Gauls right here, they were working for, some of these colonialists in that area, right? Some of the Portuguese, because they had communities in Africa when they were taking it over, basically, they were singing and dancing like we did when our ancestors came to America, right? And so here we see that no Gaul, right, whether Jew or Jewish. So we know that the Gauls are Jewish, we know that the Gauls are Jews, and that they're Mandinga, and that they're black people. So we have established that these people who went there to Portugal, right, were a black people. Now, some of those people were mixed with white. Just like today in America, some of our people are mixed, right? So they were living amongst the Portuguese, and they mixed, and they were called mulattoes, and they were sent where? To West Africa, and they were sent to St. Thomas. So this is the Mandinga, right? Mandinga, Negro land, right? Why are the Negroes black? Because the Negroes lived where? In Negro land, right? Where is Negro land, right? It's in Africa. Where's the Mandinga? In West Africa. That's where they were sent. And we saw that the Mandinga were considered Jews. And they were considered to be black Jews. And the black Jews were kicked out of Portugal. And as you do more study, kicked out of Spain as well and sent to West Africa. They don't tell you that. All they usually do is tell you Portugal got rid of the Jews. Portugal kicked the Jews out of the country. Well, where did they go? We saw that the Jews went where? To West Africa. Why did they send the Jews to West Africa? Why didn't they send them to Eastern Europe or someplace? Because they were black people and they were sending them back home. And why did they send them back home? So that they can go into slavery. Okay? And that's why they set up the slave coast. As I go along and I do more studies, I'm going to show you what they thought of our people, right? And how they said, well, the Jews are docile, right? And basically we could do with them what we will because they're not going to resist because they don't have any identity, right? They don't have any racial identity like us white folks, right? Or other cultures, because other cultures wouldn't put up with this mess. Other cultures will stand up and fight for their freedom, but not the Negro. All you have to do is feed the Negro and put him to the side and he'll be fine. And then the smart Negroes will turn on the lesser Negroes and keep them under control. This is stuff that they said, right? And this type of stuff will make you angry. It makes me angry But you know what? When you think about our people, we are sheep, right? The Bible says we are sheep. Yeshua is our shepherd, right? And I see that in us, right? And you know, we are, like, for instance, they shoot our people in the back, right? Cops shoot them, unarmed man. What we do? Nothing. At least some of us try to protest, but for the most part, what we do? Nothing. Because we are a passive people. I think as bad as Esau is, right? Esau is a killer. Esau kills, steals, and destroys. He invades. He kills babies, mommies, daddies, everything else, right? But the Negro is totally opposite of Esau. The Negro is passive. The Negro, like, you know, you beat me up, you kicked me in the head, you even shot me, but you know what? I forgive you. I mean, that's pretty much how we are. I mean, you know, that's just what I see. But, you know, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because, you know, we are Father Yah's people, and Father Yah forgives, and he has mercy, and he has grace. And, you know, now granted, we are stiff-necked people as a group. Now, in some of the other studies, you're going to see, you know, or in the book, whatever I decide to do, you're going to see where they say, well, you know, the Zulus, they're Negroes, right? They're Jews. But they say, you know what? We're not messing with the Zulus, because the Zulus fight back, and they fight back hard. So we're going to just leave them alone, right? And so I'm going to have to, you know, consolidate all this information, put it together, and maybe put it in the book or put it on the DVD. I haven't decided. So let me know what you want. Do you want me to do the book? Do you want me to do the DVD? And if you say yes, that doesn't mean I'm going to do it. But, you know, it takes a lot of work to do that, and especially if you're going to do a history about it. Now, one thing I'm going to do, just to let you know, if I do it, you know, since this is going to be an historical book and not scripture, right? Because what I do is I don't charge for the Word of God. I don't charge for teaching the Word of God. I don't do none of that. But if I'm going to do a book on history, that's totally different, right? And because it's going to take up a lot of my time, and I'm going to have to do the research, and I'm going to have to get the books, and I'm going to have to consolidate it. So, you know, once again, if you want me to do that and you would be interested in it, let me know, because right now, I don't know if I'm going to do it. I really don't want to do it because I know how big a task it's going to be. But, you know, right now, it's for benefiting the family, right? I mean, we're here to benefit the family, to help Israel wake up, because our people, even when you see the evidence, you don't believe. I'm like, ain't nothing I could do about it. I've done my best. Now, what I do want to add is that this thing is almost over. You know, if you saw my end time prophecy videos, you will see that things are lining up just as prophesied. Now, there's a lot of things happening in the world today, you know, with Trump, with Syria and North Korea and all these things, and Russia. I mean, they're all coming together just as in my videos, right? So, you know, I have to throw this out to my brethren, right? And y'all got to listen to me, right? I mean, you don't have to do what I say, but this is all I ask. Please seek the Most High on your doctrine. Please seek the Most High on law, on grace, on faith, on mercy. Because you know what? It matters, right? If you don't come by faith, you're not going to be received by the Most High, even though you His blood. So I need you to pray about it. Read the Word of God while you praying. You know, pray and then read the Word of God and pray while you're reading, and ask the Most High for enlightenment. Read Romans for yourself. Read Galatians for yourself, right? Read Corinthians for yourself. Read the New Testament for yourself. You know, because some people are going to tell you that the New Testament hasn't started yet. The New Covenant hasn't started yet. And it has, right? Because the covenant was in the Messiah's blood, right? And when He died, there was a new covenant, a better way. That's what the scriptures teach. But, you know, our people are gullible, just as they say, because we are a trusting people. We are, you know, and some of us are too trusting. And some of us need shepherds, right? Because we are sheep. We are Father Yah's sheep. Now, Father Yah said He's going to give you ministers and preachers after His own heart, but you got to have discernment. Okay, so that's enough said, because I just had to put that out, because things about to heat up. You want to make sure you're right with the Most High. Peace. Love y'all. Do the research. And make sure you wake people up. Those who you know are Israelites by blood, you know, who are Negroes and who don't know this truth, it's your job to wake them up. And if you're a white person who says you believe that we are Negroes, it's your job to wake them up as well, you know. Because guess what? Some of y'all coming back to the land with us when we go back, and some of y'all not. And so those who are in alignment with Father Yah's will, that's who's going to go back. You know, so peace out. Love you.